Anyway, hey everybody, welcome to what is DC special?
Yeah, it should be like DC special.
Yeah, it'll be some like DC special podcast.
So
I believe in. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. We don't usually introduce ourselves, but
we
go
haven't done
ahead.
this a long time. Go ahead.
Yeah, you go. Okay, good. Well, I'm down with it.
I'm a legal machine, and you are?
I already said.
Did he?
No, I spoke over. Let's try it again. All right, my name is Legal Machine. You are?
Yeah, that's right.
Mr. Fix It.
And today we're going to talk about DC Comics. This one is Swamp Thing.
So
Born on the bayou.
go for it. Yeah, we've talked about doing the movie, but I'm not gonna we're gonna get spiked from Spotify if we run any of the CCR music. But if you want to sing it, you want to karaoke it, we can probably get away with that shit. So feel free.
That was about the only part.
You can you can do the fake guitar while we're talking.
You know what cracks me up though about that? You know, they're from fucking California.
I know, but they're from the bayou.
But they're not though. They're from like CCR's from like California. There's no bayous in California.
Ain't no swamp land in California.
Dan Fogelberg sounds like.
I know what he sounds.
Or John Fogerty. John Fogerty. Yeah, Dan, two different guys.
Dan Fogelberg.
So yeah,
is that how you get past the copyright right?
He sells it. Yeah.
Here's Down on the Bayou.
Well, they're both musicians. They're both songwriters. So.
Or you could also do.
I Stolen Valley. If I was actually from Louisiana, I'd be weird. Well, they were from the Bayou City, so we have much, but they were obviously saying about Louisiana. He's from California saying Bayou. He doesn't talk like that.
You guys. Bayou guys.
It's the Bayou, you guys. Let's go to Whole Foods. Is it the Whole Foods by the Bayou? CCR's a sham. That's a conspiracy.
Matt, since I don't know that we'll ever get around to doing like movies or anything, what history do you have with Swamp Thing?
You don't think we'll ever get around to doing podcasts on the Swamp Thing movies? Is that what you're about to say?
That's what I'm leaning towards.
I don't think you have to speculate. We're not going to do a podcast on the Swamp Thing movie.
Okay. I'll do one.
I will not be doing a podcast on the Swamp Thing. Actually, you know, I might have seen them.
Okay, so what is your background with Swamp Thing's character?
I don't know, dude. I remember that there was some sort of show at some point, but that was recently, right?
You about the live action one or the one that was from the app?
Oh, the cartoon?
Maybe the cartoon?
Surely you watched Dick Rock on the USA Network.
Yeah.
90 some odd episodes.
Nice. Yeah.
It was an actual show. It wasn't on Up All Night.
Oh, I'm thinking of the movie. My bad.
Yeah, no, maybe Swamp Thing did run on Up All Night, but they actually had they cut some kind of deal where USA Network ordered like 100 fucking episodes of Swamp Thing, and got some kind of a cheap rate on per episode, so they have a lot of content. And so there's just like 80, 90, 100 episodes of Swamp Thing for USA Network with the same actor who portrayed the character. Well, I want to say I'm not sure if he did the voice though. Like I thought a stuntman was in the suit and then somebody else was doing the voice, but I'm not sure about all that. So anyway, but did you have any exposure to Swamp Thing as a kid? That's what I'm talking about.
I mean, I knew he existed more than I know the cartoon. I think I watched some of the cartoon. I know some sort of show.
Swamp Thing.
Yeah,
you make when they changed the lyrics. I know.
Yeah, I think something wrong.
Yeah.
That's it.
But no, dude, I definitely knew more of him than Man Thing, his Marvel Comics counterpart. But I don't know.
You had no background.
No.
Okay. So like the whole thing was 1986 is generally considered one of the greatest years in comic book history, certainly for mainstream North American comic books. And so I was trying to touch on some of those crown jewel comic books from that year. And we did Dark Knight Returns already, thankfully. If people like that episode, I'm sure I'll have someone to read on that later on. And so I threw out some other stuff that was 86, and you said you wanted to do the Swamp Thing one. And I think partly because we don't really have like a deep background with Swamp Thing, any of the three of us, as far as talking about it as a group, not necessarily reading stuff. So I was curious, was it just the novelty of shit? I never talked with the Swamp Thing.
I think your other options were like Born Again, right?
Like Born Again, Daredevil, Watchmen, stuff like that.
Yeah, but we
played out.
We talked Watchmen before. I don't know.
I had to go back and listen to the one we did on the movie, for instance. I think we did an episode of the movie, didn't we?
I hope so.
Was that after us? Okay.
That might have been. Yeah, but it gets brought up in random episodes.
Sure.
You can't do a comic podcast without talking about Watchmen in some form at some point. And then, if I remember really, Born Again was really long.
No, not really. Less than a year.
Or am I just
like 6 to 12 issues. So probably like 8 issues, I want to say.
One trade.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, too, that's a different podcast. We won't leave to that. But it's the same. They still link to a normal trade paperback. Like, it's about as thick as your copy of the Swamp Thing one we were covering right over there.
It seemed felt long. I don't know. All right. Well, anyway, but I've read it before. Whereas the Swamp Thing stuff I hear about a lot, and I've never read it.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, well, maybe this is it. I've read about Alan Moore stuff. It hasn't come into my.
It's basically just Alan Moore in this, right?
What? Huh?
It's basically just Alan Watchmen in this, right? Yeah. V for Vendetta. I think you did V for Vendetta too, didn't you?
It's on a movie. Didn't
you read the book? Okay. So let's fix it.
Mm-hmm.
How about your background on Swamp Thing?
I do remember reading some of the DC comics, like I think Showcase. Maybe?
don't remember him in Showcase. He had his own series. He was in House of Mystery.
Something like that, yeah.
It was a one-off story.
Like an anthology.
And the numbers were good on that. They wanted to do an ongoing of that. And so they launched into an ongoing immediately. Well, I mean, they didn't test drive the ongoing. They had the one-shot story in House of Mystery. And then like a year or so later, they launched Swamp Thing #1. And then that ran its course. And then they had in issues of Challenges of the Unknown, very randomly. And then in the early 80s, they launched Saga of Swamp Thing.
So I had an uncle who read comics, and he lived at my grandmother's house, and he was a bit of a collector himself, but not of comics, just of books and items. And I remember finding like some of my original Hulk comics, like the first Hulk comics I read. I want to say he had a Swamp Thing, some Superman stuff, Green Lantern. So anything that I got into, I found in his stash of comics that I read. So I would say the comic was my first experience, and then of course I saw the first movie, which was a horror movie, and then I saw the second movie. I saw some of the TV show. I saw a little bit of the cartoon. I have a couple of the figures, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And Alan Moore is in my wheelhouse. So yes, I read pretty much the entire Swamp Thing run of Alan Moore. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And for me, it started with Swamp Thing #1, which is what this series started out as, the series we're covering today. And I had a thing for Fumetti covers. I loved it when they would actually photograph the heroes because there's a real dearth of quality superhero live action material in our time growing up. And so to see an actual performer in a proper suit portraying the character piqued my interest. I bought the first couple issues of Saga of Swamp Thing. Down the line, I got reprints of the Bernie Wrights and Lynn Wein stuff. And then I read a few issues of Alan Moore and then later Rick Veitch Swamp Thing, kind of catch as catch can. Randomly, one of the Swamp Thing issues after it became mature readers landed at my comic shop. Or no, not at my comic shop, at the convenience store that I was going to. And I read it, and it was just above my head. It's like it was too dark and too sophisticated, and I just didn't get it. And I just never circled around the Swamp Thing. You know, I would read stuff from the Vertigo period, and it didn't really grab my interest.
Wrote some of it, did Grant Morrison.
Yeah, and that was, they were as a combo.
Yeah, the combo, yeah. I got some of that stuff, too.
Yeah, I didn't really read any of that stuff. I was trying to read it during, like, the, it was a female writer. It wasn't Nancy Collins, I don't think, or maybe it was. But there was a female writer, and she was working with people like Tom Mandrake and stuff, and it just wasn't really grabbing my attention. I'm not really big on plants. It's just like, I don't like dinosaurs, I don't like plants. There's a lot of things in the world that just don't interest me.
Fantasy stuff.
Yeah, I like fantasy stuff.
Dwarves and whatnot. Fairies.
Yeah. So
Elves.
No use for elves. No.
Or wizards, orcs.
So
Dragons.
I just didn't feel compelled to go back and read
Unicorns. Unicorns, maybe.
Yeah. But because I felt like this was one of those high water marks in comics, and again, like you've been hearing about it all your life. Oh, you got to read the Alan Moore Swamp Thing. It's like, well, when you were like, hey, let's go ahead and do it, because I'd suggested just the one from '86, but I'm like, well, I mean, I might as well start at the beginning of the Alan Moore run. So I went ahead and went back and finally read the early Alan Moore stuff up to the books that we're covering.
This is book 4.
Right. That's the fourth collection.
I just want to see it. Maybe I'll flip it over and down by it.
Well, you're not. Oh, this one. I got you. So, but we're not talking about it just yet. So, Mr. Fixit, you said you didn't go back and read the original Saga of Swamp Thing issues that I think Marty Pasco was doing. You did from Alan Moore on, right?
Yes.
Like the Anatomy Lesson or something?
Actually, I have a funny story. I don't know if you remember. I was collecting the Alan Moore Swamp Thing stuff. We went to Nan's back when it was cool, when it had the hippies working there, and they had a bunch of back issues I was missing that I hadn't got to read yet. And so I grabbed a stack of them and I asked the guy, hey, can you cut me a deal on these? And he laughed at me. He's like, yeah, we don't do that here in this one. I'm like, you're not cool. So, but luckily, I
the hippie wasn't cool?
I want to say it was the hippie, the dude with the long beard.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was kind of like disappointed, but then I think I went to like I think we went to Cube maybe at the time, and I found like almost all of it there back then. That liquidation comic shop.
Yeah, no, I know which one you're talking about. Was it before it was Cube then?
Troy's.
I think it was
Troy's. Yeah, I think it was Troy's. Yeah, I think it might have been Troy's. Yeah, you're right. I think it was Troy's. Yeah. And so I picked up almost all of it there, and that's when I was reading like Miracle Man, Watchmen, V for Vendetta. I went and found his Vigilante stuff because I remember he had some issues of Vigilante. I read his Green Lantern stuff. So yeah, I was like on a big Alan Moore kick for a while.
Okay.
And so yeah, I read pretty much the whole floppy of his, and I got up to Veitch. Like I think I stopped maybe 4 or 5 issues in, and then I kind of stopped.
So the collection I read, it was the Saga of the Swamp Things they were doing in the late aughts, and they had like a lot of like heavy duty introductions, and introductions pissed me off because I kept having stuff foiled when I like would rather have gone there cold early, which those were like afterwards instead of forwards, because I don't know why. I think you can tease what's happening, but you don't need to actually go into detail about shit that I'm about to read in a fucking forward. You know, you be discreet, right? Don't tell me fucking spoilers and shit. But they kept doing that in the Saga of Swamp Thing trades, and like an idiot, I kept reading the forwards before. So it spoiled some shit for me. But one of the things that was interesting was they talked about how the first issue of the Alamo run had rarely been reprinted or never been reprinted because it was a terrible entry point to the series, because he was basically wrapping up or putting a coda on the stuff the previous creator team had been working on, where it's like the Sunderland Corporation, and you got these supporting characters that are writing out of the series, although they come back in later on. Do you remember any of that stuff, Bissette, when you read it?
No.
You're pretty much the anatomy lesson on, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And, like, I already knew about what happened in the anatomy lesson before I read it. I read it when they did a series called Essential Vertigo, where they reprinted the series in black and white for like 20 issues or so. And I liked it okay, but it didn't blow my mind because I didn't read it in 1982 or whatever, when, you know, it was something that was like really shocking. Did you care for the anatomy lesson? Do you think that it holds up as an isolated piece of work, or do you have to have read it in its time period to have your mind blown?
I would think you have to read it in its time period. Because I have to reread it now.
What is it about? Tell me about it. What's it about?
Right?
What's the anatomy lesson
about? You read it?
No,
When I read,
what are you telling me?
Okay, I'll tell you what about this, since he's...
Don't put him on the spot. He knows what we were talking about. We thought we were talking about this.
Okay, we are. Forget it. This is preamble. So, the origin of Swamp Thing was that you had a scientist named Alec Holland, and I believe he worked with his wife named Linda, and they were trying to come up with a formula that would fast grow vegetation so they could produce food more quickly for the feed hungry masses and stuff.
intro of the movie.
Which is the same thing that happens in the movie, essentially. Yeah. And somebody wants the formula, and they won't give it up. And so they murder their wife, and they set a bomb in the lab to blow up the lab, and with the lab, they blow up Alec Holland, who runs out a flame, doused not only in explosive materials, flammable materials, but also the chemical solution they're working on to create the super botany, and he falls to the swamp, and then eventually the chemicals turn him into the Swamp Thing, and so he wanders around and has misadventures. He mostly runs into a guy named Arkham. Sorry. Is it Arkham? Dr.
Arcane.
Arcane. Yeah, Anton Arcane.
Yeah.
And he is portrayed in the movies by, what is it? Jean-Louis?
Yeah, I can't remember his name. I picture him right now, but I can't.
He's a French guy. He's in both
Very
the movies.
cool.
Yeah, he was in Octopussy. He was the villain in Octopussy. Octopussy was the organization that's helping James Bond against this character. He is like a Lovecraftian, like, experimenter into the bizarre, and I think he wants to, like, maybe be immortal or some shit like that. And
I thought he was dying.
maybe so.
I think he was dying, yeah.
And at some point, Adrian Barbeau comes out and shows the titties.
You're talking about the movie? That movie, he's dying.
Yeah.
And he's trying to find a cure, and they find genetics will probably be the way for him to survive.
And he does a bunch of like Dr. Moreau, creating monster shit and everything, and eventually turns himself into a horrible spider creature to fight Swamp Thing, which is where Alan Moore comes into the series. So what happens in the anatomy lesson is it's narrated by the Floronic Man, Jason Woodrue, who was an Atom villain. And in the Atom stories, he was from another dimension, but in more modern comics, he's just a scientist who's obsessed with plants and wanted to become a plant rather than being a man, and eventually accomplishes this. And the Swamp Thing has been killed by the Sunderland Corporation, who are the main people he kept fighting in the original run of the series, or in this run of the series anyway. I don't know. I think Sunderland came in during Saga, where he was doing more anti-King stuff in the Lin Wayne Birdie Wright stuff. Haven't read that shit in a while. So Sunderland is studying the Swamp Thing, trying to get, I think, the formula out of the body. So since they didn't get formula when they blew up the lab ship. And it turns out that Alec Holland did die in the explosion. And what had happened is the chemicals had just caused the plants to develop at a rapid pace. And with the thinking that the plant was Alec Holland, the Swamp Thing thought he was a human who'd been turned into a plant creature, but he was actually a plant who just thought he was a man. And that kind of shakes his worldview. Mm-hmm. And he kills Sunderland and escapes from the Sunderland Corporation. And that's where he began the run of Alan Moore, where he's got to come to terms with the fact that he's not a human being, even though he thought he was a human being, and he has all these organs and this visage that is man-like, but he is not a man. But he is in love with the niece of Anton Arcane, who is Abigail Arcane, who's the chick with the white hair and the black streaks and
Who
stuff.
eats his fruit.
Who eats his fruit, yeah. A very, very sexual metaphor going on there.
She goes on trips.
Hallucinogenics, yeah. It is a little, because again, he's not like feeding her eggplant. It's,
It's literally an eggplant.
it's similar.
Free emoji. Let's relax.
And so that's where the run starts. And so that's the anatomy lesson was like this first big thing where it's like, bold new direction. Everything you thought you knew was wrong kind of bullshit. It's like one one of the first instances where they really effectively pull that off in a comic book. And so and of course it's the start of the Alan Moore run, so everybody really heralds that. And I think it's an okay issue, but
I mean, I love the fact that it's a plant that thinks it's a man, or is it a man who thinks it's a plant? I remember reading it and thinking, oh man, that's deep. That's deep because it really does fuck with his head. Now he's a god, so we've kind of lost the fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, I guess we'll get to how that evolves in A Murder of Crows.
Yeah.
Yeah, motherfucker. Hold on. My shit didn't do what I wanted to do.
That sucks when shit don't do what you want it to do.
Hey, does your shit not do what you want it to do? Try Blue Chew Gold. Blue Chew Gold. It's not erectile dysfunction, it's erectile function medicine. Brought to you by Acme.
And dead air.
This episode is brought to you by Home Shield. Are you having issues with your home? They can be expensive, and traditional insurance methods may not be the proper way to fund repairs for your home. Try Home Shield.
What is that advertising company that everybody's always trying to get to advertise on their podcast?
Stamps.com. Hey, do you want stamps but don't want to go to a post office? Stamps.com.
Me Undies. Brought to you by Me Undies.
Hey, it's hot in Houston. You got ball sweat and swamp ass? Try Me Undies.
I've never had, but I've heard they're quite comfortable.
It's a smooth module fabric from the finest sheep of Australia. Keep your balls dry.
Blue Apron.
Try our code ROLLEDSPINE for Factor Meals. Are you looking to lose weight and save money in a tight economy? Factor Meals. They're delicious, microwavable meals.
Wait, don't you have to pre-make them?
No, that's the Blue Apron.
That Blue Apron.
Factor just goes in.
There's one that's like a advertising. Squarespace, I think.
No, Squarespace is another one. Yeah.
Brought to you by Squarespace. You have space and it's square? Just Squarespace.
Only because we don't know what Squarespace is. Or is that a website?
I have no idea, but it's space and it's square.
So one of the first things
we're not fucking done with the advertisements. You wait now first. All right, go ahead.
So one of the first things that we have is there's the belief that Anton Arcane was killed at the end of the Marty Pasco arc. Turns out he's not dead, and he takes his revenge against Swamp Thing by sending Abby Arcane's soul to hell. And Swamp Thing has to go through a bunch of machinations to try to reclaim her soul. Very Orpheus-like. Do you remember any of that shit?
A little bit. Then you run into what's that in the dream world in the house?
Like Purgatory?
Yeah, but no, the two characters. Cain and Abel.
Cain and Abel are involved in it.
Okay, I remember Cain and Abel. Constantine, I'm pretty sure.
Dead Man, you remember him?
Dead Man, yes.
Helping out and stuff. What about the Phantom Stranger helping the guy through hell, or to hell at least?
No.
Okay. Etrigan shows up and continues to help lead into hell.
That sounds familiar.
Okay. I think that it was Alan Moore that introduced the idea of Etrigan being a rhyming demon and that being a higher rank of demon, and so he had him speak in prose.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, does that ring any bells up?
No. I've read this literally 20 years ago, maybe plus.
So, Anton Arcane had taken over the body of Matt Cable, who was the husband of Abby. She was Abigail Cable at that point in time. And so, since the spirit and mind of Anton Arcane were inside Matt Cable's body, and they were a married couple, there was strongly implied incest as a result of that. Which is how they started. Yeah, that's how they started having to use this suggestive mature readers labeling long before there's a Virgo, and helped to launch a major conversation about censorship and rating systems in comics and caused all kinds of hullabaloo. Which is supposed to be one of the reasons why Frank Miller was not inclined to work for DC for a number of years, why Alan Moore left DC, although obviously the Watchmen rights issue was a big part of that too. But it created a whole big hullabaloo, and you don't remember that stuff?
No.
I did really like how Alan Moore was the one who started the thing where they started incorporating the horror hosts and that isolated horror sphere of characters into the mainstream DC continuity, and creating like a sub-universe within DC Comics of all their occult characters, and having them interact with each other and basically have their own little line, like their own little subline. I thought that was really cool. And a lot of that I associate with Sandman, because I saw that stuff manifested there more because I read that stuff when it was in real time, as opposed to going back 40 years for this stuff. But I have to credit Alan Moore for that, and I thought that was really cool, and I thought he did really good things with finding places for all these supernatural characters to have functions within a whole sphere of supernatural goings on.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Well, we're not to the Murder Crow at all, show. My apologies.
And then also, you had the arc where the Floronic Man is trying to claim the green and become like the fourth elemental, and he's trying to kill all the human beings with the plant life by controlling the plant life. And Swamp Thing, I think at that point, is off in hell, so he's not there to stop him. And that's when the Justice League get involved. And they do a lot of the same stuff in Swamp Thing that that Frank Miller gets credit for doing in Daredevil Born Again, where he's talking about the superheroes as gods who are in satellites above the earth watching down on us, somewhat contemptuously and blah, blah, blah. So Moore kind of pioneered that view of the, deities, the demigods superheroes, and rather the speed of clay superheroes that Stan Lee popularized for the previous 30 years, whatever it had been by that point, 25 years by that point. So that was a really cool perspective to see on them, and also just seeing the Justice League rendered in that horror style, that Palm Beach looking stuff, instead of being like big, brawny superheroes. It was neat seeing him as something that could be kind of fear-inducing, sort of like a firestorm showing up with a flaming head of hair, looks like something out of, the Hades. That could be kind of a fearsome thing for somebody, especially if that's somebody.
Yeah.
So,
isn't there a famous scene with that floral guy that has Swamp Thing's head on a staff or something?
That's Beach.
Beach, okay.
Yeah.
The covers to me always stood out. They always had great covers.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is I didn't read most of this stuff, obviously in the time frame, but they did do house ads, and Swamp Thing figured into a lot of stuff. Plus they kept getting like British Eagle Awards, and so they'd be a big announcement, hey look, we won a bunch of Eagle Awards, and they'd usually put like the covers of various highlighted issues. I think when the digest were still around, they'd throw that into their best of the year stuff all the time. So do you remember the vampire story arc?
No.
So that was a leftover from the Marty Pasco stuff, where essentially an entire town had been taken over by vampires, and the way that Swamp Thing was able to stop them was by opening up a dam and causing water to flow over the homes of the vampires. In old lore, which is something that's been lost to most fiction.
They can't cross like running water.
They can't cross running water.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So the running water destroys most of the vampires. But what Moore decided to do was, by flooding the town, and also, you've heard about this stuff, they've done that a few times in history, where they've actually flooded entire towns to create dams.
Yeah.
And so the towns are still down there in the waters.
Yeah.
And so these
towns,
and so these vampires, what they did is they climbed into like grocery store refrigerators and stuff and let the water pass by and hide in there. And then they just started coming out of the lakes and getting people from their lake abodes. And because they were able to live down there perpetually, they didn't have to sleep anymore, because down up far enough in the lake there's no sunlight. So they're just like going about their business, creating like this super vampire that's full of babies, going to erupt into a bunch of little baby vampires. It actually turns into this big singular creature, like this Gestalt creature. So that was some pretty cool shit. Not enough for
Sounds
me
like
to
a
remember it.
SpongeBob.
I wish you had told me to start from the beginning. I would have started from the beginning.
Well, I didn't want
now
to
I'm going to have to start from the beginning.
I just wanted to talk about it, since I did go ahead and go back and do that.
I thought we were doing the movies, but I guess not.
And then, do you remember the nuke base thing?
No.
They made a big deal about
Because
that.
I didn't ask you didn't ask me to read it, you asshole.
So there was apparently this homeless dude that started drinking toxic waste that they were storehousing underground, and he had access to it.
To do.
Yeah, and so that gave him like super nuclear toxic powers, where he'd come into contact people and they'd immediately like develop cancers and all kinds of shit like that. And then there was a guy who was working for the chemical plant that was trying to do a cover up on this stuff, and it didn't work out too good for him. And his wife ends up like communicating with the nuke face dude, and she has a stillborn baby, and she has like problems, like stuff. So they really hard sold that. I wasn't really super into it. I thought that it was a little too cavalier for the subject matter, and I didn't feel like the horror so much as it just being kind of gross and weird, and just not really enjoying that stuff that much. But I was surprised, because they're fairly literate comics. There's a fair amount of dialogue. When I go back and read 70s stuff that's full of purple prose, it's really fucking tough to get through that material. But I do have to say that Moore's prose flowed very well, so I was able to read some fairly thick, dense reading fairly quickly, because you were just enjoying yourself instead of being a slog and getting through it a lot faster than I was expecting to. Okay, do you remember The Curse?
No.
So I don't know if they did this very much in prose fiction, but this was one of the first times that they associated menstruation with the cycle of the moon and werewolves, and associating those two things where you change once a month because of this circumstance. And he also managed to tie it into the patriarchy and a woman slowly being turned into a werewolf because of like some native indigenous curse that had been inflicted upon women back in the day, where they were treated even worse for having periods than they were in modern times. Do you remember any of that shit? I think that's one of the ones that won an Eagle Award.
I don't have to go back and read all this shit now.
Then we're almost to your stuff. There's also the two-parter that was set on a plantation, where they were essentially going to do a Dallas-like TV series, but it was going to be set in like the time of Roots and revolve around a relationship between a black slave and the wife of a slave owner. And basically all the people in the area start getting possessed by the ghosts of the people who were around in the plantation time, and start like playing out the dramas that they'd experienced. And Swamp Thing and Abigail have to try to fight against that.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah. That one was solid enough too. I forgot about the one too where the kid has the dream demon that looks like a monkey, and it starts like trying to take the fear out of all the children in this special needs home that Abigail was working at. And that was the first time that John Constantine shows up, I think, and he has to help to stop this creature, and he sends like Etrigan the demon to help with that. None of that's ringing any bells right there. Okay. So now we're finally to A Murder of Crows, which is the run up to the 1986 run that, this was kind of like maybe the most heralded part of the run of Swamp Thing. And that's where you come in because you actually read that trade. Do you remember what the first story was?
I remember the first few are sort of, it's Constantine is sort of sending Swamp Thing on like A-Team style, or no, more like Tales from the Crypt episodes, basically, where he's getting into these like one-shot murder mystery deals, right? Let me see. First one was the hippie dude who's trying to make, I guess he's like a pot dealer or whatever, but he's giving it up, and he found one of the Swamp Thing fruits out in the swamp, which I suppose if you'd read the previous several episodes, you knew what the hell that was. Where I was like, what is this thing he picked up from the freaking forest? Is it a swamp turd, bro? I don't know.
Yeah, so this is the hallucinogenic fruit that Abby eats so that she like becomes one with the green.
Yeah.
And they basically have quasi LSD sex via their minds through these
psychotropic drugs.
Yeah. So like the first dude's looking for drugs for his wife who's got cancer, and what do you call it? He gives it to her, and it's like she dies, but she like is released of all the pain, and it's just like having the time.
They have one last beautiful experience. They have sex one more time.
And then the other one is like the crazy pot dealer, or the drug addict guy gets it, eats it, goes insane, and is like hallucinating like he's a Swamp Thing, but he's actually like driving a car crash or something like that. I think that was like the whole issue, right? It was just these people having these wild psychedelic kind of things, and at the very end, the guy was like, maybe I should try vitamin 2, because the first one was like, hey, right, he talks to the guy who got it for his wife, and he's like, oh no, so it didn't work? He's like, no, it did work. And then the next guy shows up, he's like, hey, Bill got a piece of that slice you sold, and he went crazy and had like the worst trip of his life. He's like, I want some now too. And he's like, what the hell? So then he was like, okay, well maybe this just gives the user the experience that they're supposed to have or whatever. So he contemplates taking some and doesn't have it.
So what do you think of that one?
I thought it was cool.
I really enjoyed it.
It was like a Tales from the Crypt style, Tales from the Dark Side issue. It wasn't really like a Swamp Thing story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, honestly, it kind of choked me up. I thought they did a really good job. I have a problem with Alan Moore where a lot of times I appreciate them philosophically or intellectually, but not emotionally. Sometimes they're just a real remove. And I think that one, it was him speaking from the heart about significant experiences, and they resonated with me.
But it doesn't really have much to do with like
the overall story.
From there on out, it's like
it's one of those where this is them starting off the trade with a one-off story because it's the next in line. There's a good stopping point for the previous trade, and it's a good starting point.
But for me, I haven't read the previous stuff. It definitely got you in the vibe for the rest of the story. Like, they're like, okay, this is what this book is like.
Yeah. And who did the art on that one?
Stan Woke and Ron Randall.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things that was nice too, because those were, I think it's Woke. That's how I say it. Maybe Woke or something like that. That was not the team I liked. Like the art in this book, sometimes it does kind of create a melange when you're reading it all kind of fits. They're all in the same like vein, so you don't really like, oh well, this issue looked pretty good, this issue looked pretty bad. You just kind of remember overall it was consistent. But of the multiple art teams across these issues, and particularly in this trade, those were the ones that I didn't like as much because they didn't do the horror as well, and the art was okay, but it wasn't like really great. Like the art on the hallucination trip was pretty wild, but the story I didn't think was there at all. It didn't do anything for me. So I'm glad that the story was so there for this one because it helped to elevate the art that was just okay otherwise.
Next issue was about like a serial killer who goes around. He's like, it's like a, what was it? It's like there's like a cult, like a serial killer's or like, I don't know how
it's funny.
It's a club or like it's like a mantle you've given.
Yeah. So what it is as a kid, he recognized his school janitor or something as being a serial killer, the boogeyman, and everybody was afraid of the boogeyman.
The boogeyman.
And so he killed the boogeyman by grinding up glass and putting it into his coffee. And then by killing the boogeyman, he got to become the boogeyman. And so he makes a point of remembering everybody he's killed, particularly their eyes. He can tell you the eyes of every person he's killed by what number they are, the sequence of who he's
And every time he hears a number, They just draw a panel of a pair of eyes, which is pretty cool as you go through it.
That was fun, and it definitely, you could draw a straight line between that story and the serial killer convention from San Diego.
I was going to ask you, is it?
I think it clearly was an influence on it, yeah. Now, is this Chuck, you remember anything?
Some of it, yeah. I mean, I'm listening to, I read some of these, but like I said, I didn't finish this trade.
And then this was one where, they briefly at the beginning and into this issue, they sort of set up. Oh, anyway, Swamp Thing ends up filming. But they sort of set up that Constantine has been teasing Swamp Thing. I don't know if this had been going on in prior issues too, but Constantine,
I believe so.
He keeps calling the homegirl up, and he's like, "Hey, I need Swamp Thing to meet me somewhere," and I need your boyfriend to meet me here. I need you to meet me there. And he shows up, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna give you an answer soon. You need to go do this for me." And then by the time he's done with it, Swamp Thing's like, "What does he keep doing? He keeps doing this to me."
And he keeps saying he's going to stop, and yet he keeps being roped into it for various reasons. Like Constantine knows exactly what button to push to make him keep doing the things that he wants him to do.
Yeah.
And see, what was interesting too about the serial killer story, the cover for that issue is a bleeding American flag and Swamp Thing trudging through a swamp of blood, essentially. And this was part of an overarching story that they refer to as American Gothic, where it's Swamp Thing going on a road trip and exploring the madness of the United States, which is something they also did in Shade of Changing Man. So you can again see where Moore is influencing the whole of Vertigo, essentially. And in fact, I'm inclined, since we're covering a broader scope than I had originally planned, we'll probably call the episode the Swamp Thing American Gothic or something like that to reflect that. But this bleeding American flag definitely reflects what their goal was with the overall story that they were telling, involving John Constantine making him go all across the United States and visit different places and experience the horrors that were, this is the horror of the plantation life. This is the horror of this, that, and the other thing, right? So you were moving on to the next story then.
Yeah, the next story was another Tales Crypt issue where it's two couples go on, they're going on vacation and they rent this spooky house to stay in.
Kind of like the Winchester house.
And it's a house that was built by the heiress of a gun company, and she was basically haunted by these ghosts that told her that she needed to keep going. All
the victims of the guns that their family produced were telling her that she had to keep building, and the hammerers can never stop hammering away at this house. So you create this maze of bizarro rooms and non-rooms just to keep up construction to keep the ghosts away.
So they all get split up, and then each room has, there's Native Americans coming at it, or buffalo charging through and it tramples one of the people, or there's two gunmen who are in a car, three gunmen from a card game gone bad back in the West, and they just keep blowing different parts of themselves off. You can picture this in a Demon Knight, you know what I mean? The movie Demon Knight, or honestly, it's kind of similar to some of the stuff in the Preacher TV show too, which would also have been comics, I guess. Is this the thing where Mornell steals from Alan Moore all the time? Is that
that was Garth Ennis, yeah.
Right, my bad. So it was kind of like that. It was pretty cool, and then Swamp Thing shows up and ends up rescuing the original dude, but then he finds out that the girl he was there with was actually sleeping with the dude for forever on the trip, and then
they were both married couples, so they were committing adultery against one another, and she was really bummed out that the wrong guy died, and she'd much rather her husband died than the cool guy that she'd been fucking.
Yep.
But the cocky is ultimately well, yes, dear, let's carry on now.
But did they foreshadow the end? He was going to kill her. The hammers must never stop, isn't that?
Yeah, that's right. He goes and buys one of the rifles.
He goes to the gun store and buys that specific gun.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the way that Swamp Thing is able to stop all the ghosts from causing any more harm is he starts pounding this wooden table, and his pounding is reflecting the hammer falling on the guns and driving the ghosts away, and that's how the couple were able to escape. But then the cycle of violence continues because the husband's going to murder the wife for her adultery, and because he can't deal with that shit. So my understanding is that's Alan Moore's personal favorite story from the run.
Well, it was probably it's the one that stuck with me the most.
And who did the art on that one?
I just read it. I was going to say it. It's another Stan Woke.
Okay.
Watch.
And again, I think the story, the art's solid. It's not bad.
Alcala.
Yeah, and see, that helps a lot. I think that the Alfredo Alcala inked issues are stronger than the Ron Randall ones. Ron Randall was sort of pinch hitter. Alcala was the main guy who worked with Woke, and Alcala's so good at horror. I love him as a horror artist, and I think that he really brings out the horror in Woke's art in a way that Randall couldn't. And so I definitely prefer the issues that he inks when those two are paired, when Woke needs an inker.
And then at the very end of that episode, Constantine shows up and he introduces Swamp Thing to some of his compatriots who are going to help him with the quote-unquote final stages. And Swamp Thing's like, what final stages? Like, what are we doing? What are we even stages now? We don't even know what's going on. And he's like, yeah, you're going to find out soon.
And it's a running subplot where you're introduced to a nun character, a punk punk rock girl, a kind of like a metalhead guy, and I think there's another punk rock dude, and then there's like a gal that he was
Like a
sleeping
motorcycle gang
with.
guy.
Yeah, and then there was like an alternate chick, atheist that he was sleeping with at the time. Yeah, Constantine, I should say. And see, the next issue 46 is important because this is an actual Crisis on Infinite Earths tie-in, because DC felt like they needed to have every book tie into the Crisis, and I think the Moore came up with a really neat way of overlapping them.
Yeah, it's Constantine and Swamp Thing go. Was this the Anti-Monitor ship or something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So the Monitor ship. Monitor was the guy who was gathering all the heroes back to Crisis on Infinite Earths. By the way, related. Mac, what do you know about Crisis on Infinite Earths?
It took all the dumb multiverse bullshit that DC had going on that nobody could straight anymore and just eliminated it all into one-time one.
And just streamlined everything into Marvel like continuity.
Yeah. George Perez drew a bunch of it.
Yeah, but he drew all of it. He drew all of the core miniseries. He had a whole bunch of inkers on there, so the look isn't consistent, but it's still all Perez. Ever felt possessed to want to read any of that stuff?
Nope.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a great looking book, great to flip through those issues. Don't recommend reading that shit. But like the particulars, like the Monitor and all that kind of stuff, none of that shit stuck with you.
I just know there's a Monitor, there's an Anti-Monitor.
Supergirl dies.
Supergirl dies.
That's all I know.
Cries. Yeah.
And you never read Crisis?
Nope. I just know that Supergirl dies. There's that famous cover of Superman holding her and all the DC
The
characters
event is famous. I have never heard anything good about the story. I've heard like
they always allude to it, don't they, in the DC universe? Like kind of like that's where the universe got fixed or some shit.
Yeah, but it's also one of those situations where for years they weren't allowed to, like, there was ambiguity about whether or not it happened, and that anybody remembered it happening, with the exception of like one guy I was supposed to remember. But then ultimately people kind of remembered it. They could never keep it straight.
Then they like bring a bunch of characters from that universe over. Like, isn't there like a Superboy or?
You're talking about the Superboy Prime, which is a horrible thing that they started dealing with during the sequel, Infinite Crisis.
Okay, so there was a sequel to it.
Yeah.
Okay, I knew there was
Jeff Johns and Phil Jimenez and a bunch of other
Okay,
people.
so yeah, that Superboy Prime, and they had like what, the Alex Ross Superman come through, didn't he?
I think maybe something around there. Yeah.
Thanks, I hate it.
So anyway, so you were talking about the issue though.
Yeah, and then it's like a bunch of different worlds start bleeding into our world, and there's like cat people attacking a lady in a mink coat and all sorts of stuff. This one was a little tough to follow. But then they talk about kind of basically what the main final stage event is, and it's like this cult down in South America that has basically been trying to bring about the apocalypse, but the apocalypse is even like beyond hell on earth. It's something like even hell would be. This is like pre-Big Bang darkness.
Primordial shit.
Yeah.
H.P. Lovecraft, Elder Gods kind of crap.
It can't even be like, it's not even like they're trying to, and I guess they're trying to kill heaven. So they're like, oh, they're trying to be hell, and then it's like, no, worse than hell. This is like the complete end times.
Well, I mean, part of the story is them going through hell and trying to collect some people to help them fight this thing, because even hell's worried about this stuff. At least portions of hell are worried about it. Other portions are like, bring on the chaos. We're here for it. And again, what I like is they tie into Crisis, and they're explaining that there's all this multiversal stuff going on, and there's this big war, and the heroes have been fighting, and they're fighting on that level, but they don't realize is that as these realities are congealing into one core reality, that there are opportunists who are going to take advantage of that instability to continue into a whole other crisis, which is the one that Swamp Thing and his compatriots are dealing with, and the other heroes are oblivious to and not equipped to battle, especially since they're still recovering from having fought the Anti-Monitor and the Crisis members. So it's nice how he's able to kind of continue his story while also blending it in with Crisis and explaining how Crisis helps to support what he's doing, and you get the bump from the tie-in, but he's still going to keep telling his own story about the Brujeria, trying to tap into this ancient primordial darkness that's going to destroy or wreak havoc across what we know of as the one reality that exists after the Crisis.
And I think this is the one where the Phantom Stranger first pops up in this. Is the Phantom Stranger dude, or is this who's this dude?
Yeah, Phantom Stranger.
Phantom Stranger. I'm trying to keep all these dudes straight. I know what Dr. Fate's in here, Phantom Stranger, Demon,
Constantine,
Spectre, Constantine, Swamp Thing. These are the Etrigan, the Demon, Etrigan. And then we have the little team of weird. Oh, and we'll get to it. And there's the team of weirdos that Constantine's been putting together. One of which they allude to has been missing. So someone then goes to and find the chick who hasn't been checking in. And at the end of this issue, a guy with his head on backwards kills her. Mm-hmm. Kills the nun.
Yeah, they talk about, and it's one of those things where they've been building up Constantine as like this really like hardened, cynical, manipulative person. But then when he tries to explain how these creatures are created, even he's kind of like, okay, this is too fucked up. I don't really want to get into it. But they apparently take a newborn baby and fuck up all of its limbs and twist its head around and make it an undead thing and allow it to grow up and kill people and shit. And again, you have the cast of characters that are surrounding Constantine, and they keep referencing this incident that happened in Newcastle. There was a big deal in his development and sent him to the madhouse for a period of time. And when Jamie Delano launched an ongoing series for Hellblazer, which at one time was the longest running comic book currently being published, before they finally canceled it for the New 52. Now, I think it's the 10th issue or something. They have I think it's a Dave McKean cover, and it says Newcastle, and it's sort of the origin story for John Constantine, and it's all the same characters. And so it's funny to me, having read that issue 20 some odd years ago, just for research, because I didn't really read a lot of the early Constantine solo stuff. I mostly came in with the Gardena stuff.
Yeah, that's what I read.
And but it is kind of neat to go, oh, Jesus, even this whole origin story was already set up by Alan Moore, and Delano was just sort of playing out what they pretty much laid down for you in flips and flops over the course of this series, what happened in Newcastle.
Next issue, things get weird. So it starts off.
Who drew the Crisis issue?
The Crisis issue was Revelation, then? That was Alan Moore. It's Stephen Bissette and John Totleben.
Now, you missed a chunk of those stories, obviously, because we're just focusing on a Murder of Crows trade paperback. But I've been mentioning the art. How are you viewing the art as you're going issue by issue? Are you seeing much of a difference, or is it all kind of the same to you?
No, you can tell they switch artists. Mostly, honestly, the way you can tell the most is whenever they draw John Constantine. Because he looks like totally different people. If he does not wear the trench coat, you would totally miss that it's him. If they told you it was some other character, you totally believe it.
Now, do you know how that character...
But the vibe is the same, so it doesn't screw me up then.
Do you know how that character was created?
Constantine, no.
Basically, if I remember correctly, I think it was Bissette and Veitch, the guys who were mostly drawing the book at that time, or were alternating drawing the book. They wanted to draw Sting in a comic book. And so Alan Moore created this character to compensate, to accommodate that. And of course, when they draw him, particularly when John Tottleben's inking them, then it looks like Sting. Yeah. And then when Ron Randall draws it, he looks like some guy from a fucking British TV show from the 1970s and shit.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, because he does look very photo referenced at
times
in this Crisis issue, especially. Yeah. Okay, next issue gets weird.
Oh, but so you do notice the artist changed, but that's it. The main thing is just that Constantine looks different. Otherwise, you look.
No, man, I can tell. I'm not dumb. I can tell the artist is changing, but the vibe is staying the same. So I don't care.
Gotcha. Agreed.
It doesn't bother. Next issue gets bizarre. So it leads off with this dude. He's like a photographer. He's in a newspaper, and he's showing them all these pictures of the white-haired chick. What's her name?
Abigail Kane. Abigail Kane. Yeah.
Whatever.
Okay.
Swamp Thing's side piece. She's in the swamp. She's getting undressed. She's taking her shirt off, and she's eating the fruit and basically mind-boning Swamp Thing. And he took pictures of the whole thing. And then at first they're like, this isn't sensualist. We don't really care about this. And then somebody realizes that she's one of the school caretakers at their kid's school.
Mm. And then the special needs school. Yeah.
Right. And they're like, she's a freak having sex with a guy in a swamp costume out in the swamp. Whatever. They can't have her around kids.
He's a prevert.
Which is crazy because it sounds like something that would be leaked OnlyFans pics from a teacher. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like. It feels like more of a contemporary story. And this is while Swamp Thing's going to South America. They're going to get to what is the name of the tribe again?
It's not a tribe, but the Brujeria, which is you know what Brujeria is? Fix it?
No.
Okay. So it's a bolt full of Brujo. So it's Latin warlocks essentially.
Right.
Male witches.
All right. Latin warlocks.
So Brujeria.
So as part of their journey to get to the Brujeria, Constantine has Swamp Thing go to the Parliament of Trees, which is all of these former Swamp Things that basically retire, they age out, and then they just turn into trees in this secluded part of the Amazonian rainforest. And he goes there seeking answers, and he doesn't really get any. But one of them tells him something about don't be, it's a bunch of cryptic stuff. Obviously, it looks pretty cool. All the they all freeze with their eyes and mouths up to the sky, so they pool with water and stuff. Pretty cool. The dude who drew this issue is not quite as good. It probably would have been better with one of the other previous.
So I wanted to touch on that because when Swamp Thing found out that he was a plant, he thought he was a man. He lost his mind for a while there and started reverting into a plant creature that was embedded in the soil and just losing his mind. Okay. And there's one really great panel where his eyes and mouth are full of water that collect from rain. And so he's rubbing replicating that story. But the original one was, I believe, a Bissette and Totleben issue. So seeing that reflected again here using the Parliament of Trees, like, hey, that's a great visual. If I didn't know that you were recycling something from 15, 20 issues back, then I would really give you props. I remember specifically that was probably a Walt Randall issue, or maybe even Ron Randall on his own. And because it was depicting all this cosmic stuff, it works for me, even though it's not as ambitious as some of the other artists would have been. And again, one of the best parts is recycling something that another artist had conceived of.
Woke Randall.
Yep. And I'll point out that they did get in the original Swamp Thing from the House of Mystery story, which was set in Victorian times. And also they alluded to the Heap, who was a swamp creature from the 1940s, Hillman Publications, and really like the progenitor of all these swamp monsters that turn up in comic books afterwards.
And Man-Thing's in it too.
Yeah, I think they do allude to the Man-Thing as well.
There's a Man-Thing picture in it too. Like, it's obviously Man-Thing.
Yeah. They got that nose root.
Yes. Or the three tentacles or whatever coming out of his face. And then at the end, the message they kind of gave him is that they said that I must avoid power and beware of anger. And they asked me, where is evil in all the wood? And then they kind of cast him out, which just, again...
Yeah, well, basically explaining that, meat eats meat, meat dies, the meat feeds the trees grow fruit, fruit's eaten by a creature, that creature's eaten by another creature. Basically, some cycle of life shit. So it's like, there's no evil in the wood. It's just everything's acting according to its nature and perpetuating the cycle.
Yeah, and also like that wood listens, wood doesn't speak, flesh speaks, wood listens, and that's why he's getting cricket answers and whatnot. Let me see.
You're doing too much human shit.
Okay, chapter 6, we've actually got crows.
I think that's the one that's actually called Murder of Crows, right?
It is called Murder of Crows. So now they're actually going to...
South America or something?
They got the whole squad together except for the nun that's missing and the other girl that's missing, and...
well, I think they already know that the lover of Constantine had apparently killed herself, but they don't know that one of the twisted-headed creatures had killed the nun.
Yeah. And they got a name for this dude, right? The twisted head? It'll
Not necessarily the dude, but the type of dude, the creature.
Whatever the demon is, they have a name for it, but it's eluding me now. So now they're actually to the cave, and they're like going in, right?
What do you think about the design of Swamp Thing for this story?
It looks cool, where he's sort of like in his like monarch form or whatever, and he's growing like extra plants and whatnot.
Well, you just were in California, and you're talking about how there are plants in California that you've never seen anyplace else in the world. And so one of the things the artist wanted to capture is, since Swamp Thing has determined that he has the power to essentially teleport, he can go into the ground and then manifest in another part of the world over a fairly short period of time.
But it's that world's fauna.
Right. One of the things they set up in the Nuke Face papers was that Swamp Thing was essentially destroyed by the dude with the toxic powers, and they think that he's dead, but eventually he casts his mind into the ground and is able to reform a new body from the earth up. And it was Constantine that helped to explain that, no, you can do that whenever you want to, wherever you want to, so you can teleport to all these different places, and it's a power that is very advantageous under these circumstances. And since he has to reform a brand new body in South America, he's using indigenous plants, remote plants, and so he looks much more fantastic and much more exotic than he normally would, because he's being made from the plant life of the region.
Yep. Okay. Constantine and his squad go into the cave. They were like, hey, we gotta split up, gang, like Scooby-Doo style. Constantine gets captured by the
Brujeria.
The Latin warlocks.
Well, specifically, he gets nailed by one of the twist-headed creatures.
Yeah. And then the hipster girl with the biker dude, they go off. She, like, I don't know, starts slobbing on
Pretty sure she's slobbing on the knob.
On the knob. Like 3-6 Mafia dude. And then
he gets, like, I spit on your grave. Like, she probably fucking shanks him somewhere delicate. Yeah. Because she's working with the Brujeria.
She's been working with the Brujeria, and that's it. That she was wanting to be a bird, and then turned into a bird, and whatnot. So she's going around and just double-crossing all of Constantine's squad, killing everybody. She betrayed him or whatever, he's mad about it. And yeah, she brings the dude's head in there. She strips down naked. They have her like eat or drink something, dude. She drinks something, and then she falls to the ground and basically starts turning into like a bird. It's kind of graphic, the way they have her like slowly, her head is like morphing into this like crow. Mm-hmm. It's kind of weird.
Well, and they also
in the meantime,
put the black pearl into her beak, and you have to hold it on pain of death, essentially.
Yeah.
Because she's the one who's going to carry the message to the darkness at the end of the universe.
The marble or whatever.
To tell it to come fuck with with us. Yeah.
So, and then Swamp Thing can't get into the tunnel because they knew that Swamp Thing was coming, so they like closed it off, and there's no
vegetation there for
because they
them.
prepared for it. Except Homegirl, who betrayed them earlier in the issue, pulled a flower from a branch and stuck it behind her ear, and then when they lop her head off or whatever with the marble in it, when the thing that was in her ear hits the ground, suddenly Swamp Thing can grow through the ground through the flower, and he appears to save everybody.
Well, the problem is that
Constantine
is being slowly drowned in liquid mud, and he insists that Swamp Thing stop the bird, don't worry about me, stop the crow, and Swamp Thing saves him instead, and he's like, you fucking daft fool, you're into the whole fucking universe, save my sorry ass, and the crow begins to fly throughout the dimensions, into hell, heaven, hell, everything. She passes by the Spectre, and the Spectre's like, yeah, go find the darkness. I'm looking forward to what you come up with so I can beat its ass, because I'm the Spectre, I'm a bad motherfucker. Where
is he a god, Spectre?
He's God's embodiment of vengeance.
Okay.
Particularly Old Testament vengeance. Well, it's old vengeance anyway. Biblical vengeance. There's some stuff they fuck around with later on that would muddy that up a little bit. And then, the crow passes over hell, and Edgar tries to spit fire at it, but can't quite reach. And, Dead Man saw a crow, and he just thought, hey, what the fuck's crow doing in the purgatory? We don't get a lot of birds here. Stuff like that.
All right, the next issue, they show...
By the way, the art on that issue was John Totleben completely on his own, right?
I think so. It was pretty good.
It really... I find Totleben's artwork amazing. I don't fully understand how he managed to get the textures he does on the page. I don't know what he's doing to get these techniques where you've got that variance in the line weight, but they're like strips that are not straight lines, but they're like even weight, and they're like blocks, and they trail off into thin lines, and it's just incredible. And because he inks so much of the stuff that other artists do on these stories, the art is consistently beautiful when he's involved with it, and helps to really elevate the quality of this book to a level that I think is an all-timer, because he's just fucking amazing. And he's even better when he's on his own, even though I know he's probably too slow to work on his own. I mean, he's too slow to ink all the issues, much less pencil and ink the issues. But because that was a key part of the story, I think that having him on that story was an excellent choice, and that's one of the best looking issues of the run. Totleben's just fucking amazes me.
Yeah, that issue is very, very nice. The next issue leads off with Abby showing up to work, and they've got the cover of the newspaper that says Beauty and the Beast, beautiful childminder's monster love games, and it says there's something about Bigfoot and all this stuff, so she gets fired and the police take her away.
Yeah, she's arrested on morals charges in Louisiana.
Yeah. Okay, so now the Crow is making its journey to bring back the underworld people. They kill all the Brohelia dudes.
Yeah, so they were being snarky about how, shit, we got rid of all the vegetation, you can't do nothing. It's like, this cave is surrounded by vegetation. He just basically collapses the cave in on those motherfuckers, and they're just wiped out immediately. So, too bad they didn't just go straight to that.
Yeah.
That would save us all a lot of trouble.
So then, so Constantine's like, okay, well, that was plan A, now we got plan B. And he's trying to assemble a squad of magicians, right? He gets, Zatanna, her dad, he was in some dude's house that nobody goes into.
Zatara, Baron Winter.
Zatanna and Zatara.
Yeah, Zatara's the dad, Zatanna's the daughter. Sargon the sorcerer, who was somebody I think you see bought from another publisher that never figured out what to do with. He's got a fucking turban, but he's a white dude. Minto. Minto's in the mix for some reason. So Minto is using his... Yeah, he was a member of the Doom Patrol. He was like a super rich guy who bought his way into being a superhero by buying this helmet that gave him telepathy, but he was kind of tweaked by it. And then at this point in history, his wife had been killed as a member of the Doom Patrol and stayed dead in that time period. And he was had anxiety issues and shit. But Constantine keeps manipulating him and pushing him into a situation where they're all at a table. He's mentally linking all the mages, and they're physically holding hands.
And Dr. Fate's there too. And this is when
Dr. Fate is not there.
Maybe he's not.
Yeah.
But that's when they go to the Spectre and they ask the Spectre, "Will you join our hand-holding Care Bear Stare Club and to fight this monster?" And he's all like, "No." So I wanted to show up so I can test my might against it. And they're like, "Cool, you're weird." And then
well, I think it's worth noting Constantine is working with one group of mages, and Swamp Thing is following another group of supernatural beings. So Swamp Thing is with Dead Man, the Phantom Stranger, Etrigan. They're the ones who are going into literal hell to try to get an army together, but are also having to fight off an army within hell that are already prepared to align themselves with this great darkness that's arising.
Yeah. So then, like, this is kind of where this is where the story got a little confusing for me, because like there was this like this is to me is kind of like Blade, to be honest with you, where we're supposed to just be like the blood wind, and it's like, well, what is it? And it's like that's the blood wind or whatever the bad guy was. And it's a wave of death. Yeah, but what is it? It's the marble. Everybody's scared of it. But then all of a sudden they're like, there's like demons in it too, and they're like these like weird goblin demon things. But then I'm like, okay, so now, but they're in hell fighting actual demon things. And so the kind of confusing.
Yeah. So and that's why I wanted to have somebody who had like a neophyte view. What it is you've got legions of hell who are intending to work with the Great Darkness and are going out as an advance squad for the Great Darkness, and they're running into the demons that have aligned with Etrigan's group that are trying to stop the Great Darkness.
Okay.
So that's hell and hell violence you're seeing there. They're not actually part of the Great Darkness. The Great Darkness is the big sandworm, black tornado thing that's slowly making its way through hell.
Okay. The blood wind thing. Okay, got it. So then everybody's doing like the action hero armor up thing, and like Etrigan puts like the stars on his eyes.
Yeah.
And
he's like spiking these like scorpion creatures on his shoulders and shit.
Yeah, and he's got like and he squishes it on his head. Mm-hmm. And he's got a demon horse and everything.
Yes, and this one was definitely advertised. That year, DC was making a big deal about their anniversary issues, whether it was issue 250 or whatever, and this was issue 50, and it was an extra-size $1.25 comic book, and the cover's got Swamp Thing riding one of these demon insectoid horses, Etrigan's on another one, you got Deadman and Dr. Fate flying in the background, even Phantom Stranger's riding one of the horses, and you have the spectral vision of the Spectre in the background, like looking over them and shit. It was just like a really cool, badass, like Justice League of Monsters kind of image, and that's definitely something that imprinted on me when I would see it in house ads growing up.
So a dark JLA before there was a JLA.
Right. But thankfully not actually called Justice League Dark, which is the dumbest fucking shit ever.
All right, calm down.
Like something
calm down.
Fucking the creators of those books should be embarrassed that they wrote books called Justice League Dark, regardless of the quality, which was actually not bad. Especially some of the like
animated stuff was good.
The Ram V stuff was actually really good, and they did some really cool stuff with actually playing around with Earth magic and Wiccan shit with Wonder Woman, and playing around with the paganistic shit. It was a crossover called The Witching Hour. That was pretty cool stuff. But a book called Justice League Dark is fucking dumb as shit. I fucking hate that book.
Okay, all right. Okay, Swamp Thing. Good lord. Okay, so then this is also something I thought was a little on the right side, right? So then, like, you got the Constantine squad of all the magician patrol or whatever, and they sit down at a table and they hold hands like it's freaking Beetlejuice. And like, so they're using Minto to see what's happening in hell, and he's giving them like a play-by-play, right? Mm-hmm. And then they're like, Etrigan's going to fight the blood thing, or the blackness,
the darkness, the great darkness.
Yeah. And they're like, okay, let's put our power behind him to help him.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, he died. And they're like, oh. And it like the force feedbacks into the guys. I'm like, Zatara is the dad?
Well, the first one that dies is Sargon the Sorcerer.
He like bursts into flames, but they're having to like hold the hands of his burned body.
Well, and I really like how he's like, oh my god, I'm dying. And Zatara is like, bitch, collect yourself. You're going to die, yes, but be a man about it.
Yeah.
Be a magician. You're be a sorcerer. Act like it. He's like, yes, you're right. I lost my head for a moment there. I'm sorry. I'm going to die with dignity now. And then I love that moment. I thought that was really cool.
And then he goes next, right?
Yeah. Then what happens is the feedback is hitting Zatanna, and she's the next weakest link in and which doesn't make sense to me because I really feel like Barry Winter has never been a very impressive person. So I can see Sargon being first, but I would really see Barry Winter being second. Or somehow, how is Minto getting by? You know, I guess because he's the one who's controlling how the tower.
He's the first maker.
But it's only passing through him. He's not the generation point. He's not an end point. He's just like a medium, so it's not hitting him. But I really feel like it should have hit Barry Winter next because Zatanna's done a lot of impressive stuff even at that point in her career. But she starts to burn up, and Zatara's like, "Fuck you! That's not going to happen." So he uses magic to pull the energy into himself, and then he fries, and all that's left is the top hat, the magician's top hat. Love that visual. That is such a cool way.
Is that why she's so? The rest of her, every time they write her, is that why she's so? She's always talking about her dad, and she's
Well, I mean, she was created in the Silver Age. She was the silver, like you know how they had like the Silver Age Flash. They used to have Jay Garrick, and then it was Barry Allen. They used to have Alan Scott. So she was the Silver Age version of Zatara, but instead of it being her being a new character that just happens to have the mantle, she is the daughter of the guy who was around in the Golden Age. But in her original stories, her father had been taken away by some magician magician or magical force. And so she's teaming up with the Silver Age superheroes to try to go find her dad. And so for several years, she only appears to team up with other heroes, trying to gather people to help her find their father. And then they are finally reunited. And that's like her whole thing. And it wasn't until like 10 years after that she then joins the Justice League and becomes the magic person who's in the Justice League. So they formally established that her father was a major motivational figure. He taught her magic. She continues his stage act, and she's kind of continuing his heroic legacy as well.
Okay. So yeah, he bursts into flame. Then the Spectre shows up, and they're like, "Oh shit!" And I think by that point, Dr. Fate's got whipped.
Yeah. See, Dr. Fate's another super like in terms of like magic uses that aren't like godly beings. He's probably the top of the line, and then he gets fucking nerfed by the darkness. So it's like,
this is what happens. They go into the body of this thing, and then he has like a conversation with them, like, "Who are you, little one?" And then he goes, and he spits them out.
Yeah. Well, also he keeps asking them a question, and they keep like defining him as, "You're a piece of shit, and I'm going to beat you." No, you're not. He kicks her ass and throws them out. Like,
and the same thing. The Spectre shows up, and you think the Spectre's like the same size as this thing, and then he looks up.
Well,
and sees exactly
you know enough about comic book levels where once you're at the Spectre level, it's oh shit time. So when you nerf the Spectre, it's like, oh, this is crisis level bullshit going on.
Yeah. And then and every time they go to Minto and they go, "Let's direct our power to help them," and they just go into the blot and come out, and it's just like, I don't understand what I understand Swamp Thing Squad. They're there fighting. I don't understand Constantine and how this was any sort of plan to do anything.
Yeah,
like it was never. It's not explained well, and
it's very much like a lot of people hate magic in general, but especially magic in comics.
Yeah,
you know,
and this is
because
like,
it's so ill-defined.
Why,
yeah, it's so ill-defined, and it's like, what does magic do? Whatever. What are the limitations of magic? Whatever. And people just fucking hate it. I don't mind it. I like it because I'm like,
they could have been putting some sort of psi armor on them. Something.
There's not even
like a beam.
Yeah.
They literally say in a word bubble, "Let's direct our power to help them." That's it. And I'm just like, come on, dude. You guys have been teasing this for like issues, and this is the best you can come up with. Is they're gonna hold hands at a table and say they're gonna assist somebody? Like,
it's the bear stare, man.
It's not even that. Yeah.
There's not even the beam. Dude. It's worse than that.
There's no belly icon to tell you what exactly they're doing. Are they upping his XP levels? Or is his intellect raising? His dexterity? You know, what are you doing? What are you doing with the hero point? You got to declare what hero point you're spinning.
You went D&D hard fast.
Yeah.
So then the I think this is the last episode.
It is
in the trade. Yeah.
Yeah. So then like Minto the whole dude. This guy's a lot. Where he's just like, I can't handle it. Here's what I'm seeing. I mean, it's like, and they draw him, and his eyes are like anime size, and his teeth are always all gritting and stuff. He's a lot. So then anyway, then he sees like this giant hand come down from heaven to reach out for this like demon black hand, and that's when he's just like, "Oh God, I'm losing it. I can't."
Well, again,
and like his brain fries.
It's basically a Lovecraft thing where you finally
He's talking Cthulhu.
Well, what it is, you're pulling back the camera to show the final scale, and you realize that this wasn't a giant sandworm or a tornado. This was a single finger on the hand of whatever this darkness thing is coming, and it's bigger than all of hell for just one finger. And now, oh my God, it's the whole hand! You broke my brain! And then, of course, one hand reaches for the other hand, which is the same fucking thing that happens in Crisis on Infinite Earth, where you've got this imagery where everything happens in Crisis on Infinite Earth because people are trying to find the origin point of the universe. And they keep seeing the celestial hand that's believed to be the hand of God creating the universe, and man isn't meant to see that, and it causes all this destruction and antimatter leaking out of the universe and blowing up all kinds of shit. Well, ultimately it's determined that one of the hands is the anti-monitor, and the other hand is a Spectre reaching through a portal to clasp that hand and go into final battle with the anti-monitor during the big showdown at the end of the book. And then this story kind of is the same thing, but it's the hand of seemingly God versus the hand of this ultimate darkness that's been exiled from all space and time, this beyond hell even. So it's so far removed from the light that it's a pure darkness where there is no life, there is no light, and no nothingness. And it doesn't even know what itself is because it has nothing to reflect itself in. It doesn't know it can't define its own self because it's been so far removed from all reality that it exists in a void where it doesn't even understand itself.
So what's the source wall? I thought that was God.
No. The source wall is what lies beyond what the fourth world gods know of. So you have the new gods in the fourth world, and what's beyond the source wall is all information that's beyond even what the gods know.
Okay, I always thought that was like God on the other side of the wall.
I mean, it may be going wrong, but it's just not like this is played like the biblical God.
Okay.
Jehovah, that kind of thing. The fourth world is more ambiguous. It's just a knowledge, like you have a source, and the source is kind of like the Force of Star Wars. The Star Wars totally ripped off the source, right? And the source will sometimes give directives to people, usually in flaming icons and writing, and kind of direct the gods in their actions. So it's like the God of the God, but it's also behind this barrier that nobody can breach, and the barrier is made up of people who tried to breach the barrier and failed and kind of incorporated into the source wall. So it is a divine power, but it's not necessarily in the context of a Judeo-Christian Islamic belief system, where this one is clearly
that was his intention. Okay,
yeah.
I was just wondering because
we're talking about heaven and hell, and we've got messengers of God and demons, and yet we're very much in biblical terms. Yeah, but it's still the same fucking iconography right after Crisis. So it's kind of like, you remember how people slag on Watchmen, where it's like the giant octopus is sort of a, what was that about? That's kind of lame. And this is another instance where it's like, you didn't pull that one off quite the way you'd intended. Like, I see what you're going for, but the fact you literally did the same imagery of Crisis right after Crisis, and I realize you're paralleling the story to some degree as well, but that's a little too on the nose.
Oh, gotcha.
So, struggling with the endings there. And again, it's kind of a non-ending, because they make contact, and there's a new vibe, and nothing's going to be the same again, but nothing that's never going to be the same again for what happened in this story, or what happened in the Crisis, and really, is it that different? Not. The universe is that different.
Is there still good and evil? Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's the same, but sharper. Because when Dead Man says that, it's like, what the fuck does that mean?
It's in high def.
Yeah, so then and that's where the book is.
Yeah.
Like, literally, the book ends, they, like, reached out and shook hands, or something happened, and Minto is, like, brains are completely scrambling, saying, like, it's Shell, I saw what it means!
And that was, I think they were going for Lovecraft, but it was, like, drawn so comically that it looked like something out of Mad.
Yeah, he's, like, drooling with his eyes crossed and stuff. Like, it's really, really rough.
Ooh, guys, you're getting into territory that Robert Downey Jr. would have warned against. And Minto...
Kurt Lazarus.
Yeah, Minto already has issues before that story, and afterwards he's really...
Simple Minto?
He's not... They pull back from that pretty quickly, but he's just tweaked, and he has a lot of mental breakdowns going forward, where he like goes nuts and becomes crime lord and all this other kind of bullshit. He has a lot of heel turns, and then reverse heel turns, face turns, stuff like that. Minto's never right after this, but he was not that right to begin with, so they didn't have a huge idea of him. But I love that visuals. The visuals of the people dying at the table and how they're reacting, that was great. That was part of my favorite stuff from that story.
Yeah, it was cool. It was definitely like, when they're dying, it was like, oh my gosh. The problem was that, like, I was kind of taken out of, I don't know what they're doing there anymore.
Right. And you don't really know where these people are, because you don't have background.
You're not sacrificing yourself for anything, because you're not doing anything. It's just like, we have to join hands so we can get the reception down in hell.
That's the rabbit ear, the celestial rabbit ears.
We're moving the direct TV. We're wrapping foil around the antenna so we can see what's going on. And the repercussions that these dudes are dying from it. And it's like, oh, they died in battle. Did they? Like, it's almost like your weird cousin got electrocuted stealing cable from, off the telephone line. Like,
yeah.
So we could watch, a UFC event. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand what stakes they were affecting, and it wasn't really proper. So it was like, oh wow, they're dying. But you should have just put them all in hell and let them all armor up in demon armor or something. But it kind of just took me out.
Yeah.
And then I was sort of like, I kind of like the Tales from the Crypt issues better than whatever this ended up being.
And see, I didn't mind that as much, because again, I just love the imagery. But the part where the guys would go into the darkness, and the darkness would ask them a question about its, the existential question, and they'd be like, "You're a fucking piece of shit, and I'm gonna beat your ass." And it happened enough times, it was like law of threes, or actually I think it was 4 rounds on this one. And it's just like, okay, so what's gonna happen is this one thing's gonna go in there, and he's not gonna be an asshole, and that's gonna help to fix things. And that's pretty much what happens. Swamp Thing goes in there and says, like, look, you're this big dark thing, there's an end of the universe, you're probably part of the natural order, I'm sure shit's gonna work out.
He took the advice from the elder trees that told him to resist anger and resist all that stuff.
There's no evil in the wood. Yeah, you're part of the nature. You don't define yourself by what other people tell you are. Acting special bullshit. So that was the thing that kind of bugged me, because it was like so telegraphed telegraphed. It's so obvious. And I'm sorry, that's not an innovative story element there. And I also heard that we had so many gorgeously drawn issues. And this is like the big,
The worst drawn
SmackDown.
issue in the book. Right?
It's pretty rough looking. From what you've got, Bissette, Beach, and Totleben all together, but it's a double-sized issue, and they don't have the stamina to keep up with it, and the story's kind of a wet fart in some regards. So not the strongest ending, but having read that material overall and understanding its reputation, do you still feel like this was a worthwhile read and worthy of the reputation it has?
I mean, I honestly, it made me more curious about the other issues. It is definitely not your average 1980s comic book vibe, right? Like
More literate for starters.
they're doing something different. I was struck by how often Swamp Thing wasn't the main character in his own book. This is kind of like John Constantine featuring Swamp Thing for a lot.
Especially in this arc, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of this, where I'm just like, Swamp Thing's barely even in the issue. They're like telling him to fuck off and go somewhere else so that they can do the actual story.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's also in the dark the entire series. So it is kind of like, it was, I thought it was a little strange. And I was like, I don't know, if I had been a Swamp Thing guy, I would probably hate that people call this some, like, this is like the best Swamp Thing story. The one he's not in is the one, like, really? Like, we couldn't have had one. Now, look, he does it kind of saving the day, but like you said, it's not a very satisfying ending.
Yeah.
And then,
Well, even when he's with the group of people in hell and Constantine's back on Earth, he's still not really leading the charge. Etrigan is really the guy before,
he's the one
and he's collaborating more with the Phantom Stranger, and then when they falter, the Dr. Fate's coming in, and he's a powerhouse too. So yeah, he's definitely far removed from the spotlight for most of this run.
Well, and then even at the end, he's like, what happened? So it's like, he's not even aware that he's the one who solved what happened. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And then, like, Deadman doesn't give him credit. No, nobody's giving him credit because nobody knows what happened. And it was like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and the darkness carries on and is confronted by the godlike force, and then it all is over with. So, like, yeah, he doesn't get props for whatever he contributed, if he contributed anything, because the darkness still progresses, and ultimately it faces the light, and that's how things resolve. So,
right, so was that going to happen anyway?
Yeah.
So why wasn't that Constantine's plan? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
What was the deal? It was just strange. It was a little like.
I mean, to some degree, it speaks to the futility of these, beings from our plane, or not slightly above our plane, trying to deal with something way beyond what they can even conceive of. But I don't think that's what they're going for. I mean, to a degree it was, but like the story's still kind of like, yeah, but you have to put it in terms that we can follow.
Yeah, but really, honestly, where I first kind of started getting taken out of it, or it was just some old group of like indigenous warlocks.
Yeah, the Brujeria.
And
they weren't very impressive, no.
You could have just a gun. You could have taken a gun at any point and just gone to the cave and taken care of business. Like, but he's got the shadow team all over the world, and none of them had a gun. What were they going to do? Punch things? I don't understand what they were going to do to the Brujelio dudes. None of them. They didn't have knives. Maybe one guy had a shotgun. Maybe.
I think one of the guys had a gun.
Yeah, maybe. But like, maybe you should all have a gun,
right?
Get a machete. I don't know. Like, what were we going to do? Talk to them?
Could we not have brought some mercenaries with us or something?
Right. It's one thing you're going to leave Swamp Thing out of the plan. Do we all have to be out of the plan, or was it like Alan Moore's like, what to do here? You know what I mean? Like, I've been foreshadowing this thing happening for forever, and now I got to finally wrap this shit up in issue 50 or whatever it was. And I don't know. Again, I dig the vibe of the book. I liked all the side stories. Am I really curious about his girlfriend losing her job because somebody took salacious pictures of her with Swamp Thing and the thing? Actually, no. And in fact, it kind of grosses me out a little bit. There's like a whole story about her getting defamed in the paper for fucking a Swamp Thing. I don't give a shit about that like, at all.
Well, they kind of alluded that in the second movie when Heather Locklear has sex with Swamp Thing.
Well, at the end of the book, the movie,
she grows a little flower out of her foot,
which was again cute, but also weird, gross, and you're kind of scared for her, especially because she's hot. You don't want her to be unhot by the.
But she also had a strange relationship with plants in that movie. If I remember.
Sure, yeah, they do establish.
Now I have a quick question, Frank. Does this lead into where Swamp Thing like attacks Gotham and all that stuff?
Absolutely. So
that's the stuff I remember.
Oh yeah,
and I enjoyed more.
Okay, we'll get into that.
Where he's fucking with Superman because Superman's having his fucking Menzies attack where he has like a super fever.
Okay, so
that's a special.
That's what DC Comics presents. I haven't gotten that far yet. What I was reading was that basically they're trying, after Abigail for morals charges.
It's Swamp. So that's why that story leads into this one.
Yeah.
Where Swamp Thing goes, fuck y'all, and he starts taking over town, like entire cities, because he controls the green. And you start seeing his power. Now we want to read that, I'll read that with you. I remember really liking that because there's a great one of it. I believe it's Swamp Thing screaming, and there's bars in his eyes and mouth. Mm-hmm. You have like the Joker, and like basically Arkham is being engulfed by Swamp Thing because he's pissed because they're fucking with his woman.
Yeah, so these were fairly dense reads, even though I got through them quickly. So by the time I hit 50, I really wanted to be able to stop and rest for a while. But I wanted to I even one of the forums that talked about how 51 was a coda to the story with Abigail. So okay, I'll read 51. And then I'm like at issue 56, and they're still fucking doing shit. And it's like, motherfuckers, like it just keeps going, don't it? And you're right. So what happens is Abby tries to escape the charges. Like she just Swamp Thing has been in hell for months, apparently. Like so he doesn't manifest very quickly. And so she goes through this trial, and she's out on bond. Or the person who ran the special needs home bonded her out just as a final favor, but didn't want anything else to do with her ever again. And she absconds to Gotham City. She's immediately picked up with a bunch of prostitutes because she doesn't know where the fuck she's at, what she's doing, how to navigate Gotham. They figure out who she is. They're preparing to send her back to Louisiana on charges. Meanwhile, Swamp Thing's turned back up in Louisiana. Is like, where's my chick? Not my side piece. That's my main chick. Yeah. He's already referring to his wife. He calls her his wife. Okay.
That's my guy.
And she has Abigail Holland, she responds to Abigail Holland and tries to pretend like she's Abigail Holland, especially when she's in Gotham because she's got charges as Abigail Cable, right? And so they're holding her. Swamp Thing eventually makes his way to Gotham and is like, release my woman now. And they're like, fuck you. And he's like, no, fuck you. And then just starts wrecking shit, knocking over cops. So basically, he's racking up his own charges. And she's like, somebody's going to get her, stop, we'll work it out. And they're not working it out. And so he slowly turns Gotham City into this jungle paradise. And people are like stripping naked and running around in the parks. Some people are doing like robbery and shit.
Fruit too.
They're eating his hallucinogenic fruit.
Yeah, it's like all over the place.
And the characters from the previous arcs start turning up.
Man. Starting to Coachella.
Yeah, not completely dissimilar. Like the hippie guy from the hallucinogenic arc, he shows back up again. The guy who was covering for the chemical plant during the newspapers, he turns up again. Yeah. There's all this shit from the previous story arcs that start coming back there. It's like, why weren't you doing this shit for 50? You know, why is this issue 53 that we're doing this shit? Especially because one of the issues is another double size, and it's like, you just did a double size. Are you trying to kill your artists over here?
Okay, so wait, that reminds me of something that I want to talk about back in The Murder of Crows. So you guys were talking about that, what was the original stuff, the anatomy?
The anatomy lesson.
Yeah, right. But when he's talking to the tribunal of Roundup or whatever.
The tree.
Parliament of Tree. And they're talking, he's like, well, my name's, what's his name? What's the guy?
Alec Holland.
Alec Holland. And he was like, well, I was Arnold Holmstein in Germany. And then, so that doesn't sound to me like it was a plant who just consciousness. It does sound like this is like again, they were all like AH initials that I was in an explosion and this happened. So that didn't reference anything to me that
anatomy lesson. It like undoes the anatomy lesson because of all these other guys that had the same origin. So aren't you? You still have the conscience of Alec Holland, so you are a man. Yeah. There's just no meat in you.
Right. That's what it sounds like. That like there's a Swamp Thing mantle that is given through time, like quantum leap.
Yeah, associated with the
kind of it is because when he's in the green and stuff, they're the caretaker of the green.
Right. So it's a mantle that's handed from generation to generation. That doesn't sound like what you were describing earlier.
Right.
Of a freak accident.
That's a very fair point because I hadn't really thought about it, and eventually they do reverse it during like right ahead of the New 52 and then in the New 52 where it's back to Alec Holland being a human being who becomes the Swamp Thing.
Boo.
Right. So it doesn't.
That's a great boo.
More undermines his own concept, his own radical concept that everybody swabs over because the Parliament doesn't make sense if they're not human beings first, or at least their template is based on a human being.
But I kind of like the idea that it's a plant that thinks it's human. And so it really doesn't know emotion. So it
does.
It mimics, but I think it mimics what it sees.
Sure.
It doesn't know what it feels.
You've got the whole thing, the theory that plants feel emotion, they respond to
they scream
music and shit like that.
Carrot screamed when you bit into it.
Well, to me, that sounds like that. Honestly, that sounds like a more interesting concept than where it's the mantle of the protector of the greens.
Yeah. Well, they did that later on in the Decay. And I read like the first two trades. That was pretty good.
You know about on the New 52?
After 52.
The Rod, we're talking about that.
Which
right? The Rot, because they did it.
Yeah, the Rot. There you go.
The red, which is mammals, and the green, which is plants, are fighting the Rot.
Yeah.
was attacking both of them and shit. Yeah.
That was
And
interesting.
then Kane is tied into that.
Yeah.
Is it like a glyphosate?
Well, no, I think what it was they were kind of like, oh wait, there's different colored lanterns and they all work together. Oh, I wonder if we could do that with nature. And they kind of did it with
Well, and they already
they all have their own ring.
The morphogenic field was already basically the red anyway. It just didn't explicitly tie into Swamp Thing. And then, of course, Firestorm did the whole elemental thing where Firestorm becomes a fire elemental. You have Naiad, the water elemental, and yada, yada, yada. So people were playing around with those concepts. If anything, Ethan Van Sciver was kind of ripping off what Alan Moore did.
Oh, no, he did.
Just the way Jeff Johns was constantly ripping off.
Oh, no, I'm telling you, I read the special where the Red Lanterns are born. Like, that's the solar system 666, which I just thought, were we together when we watched that martial law where they're talking about that issue where
when they're talking about Kevin O'Neill's art style was so
offensive.
There
was nothing bad. It was just so unsettling. They found it offensive.
The Comics Code Authority refused to approve a story that was drawn by Kevin O'Neill because his base style was too unsettling. It wasn't even what he was drawing, it was just his style.
Shit.
Oh, dude, it is, dude.
Okay.
One of the monsters is just like a torso with the top half being a tongue and stuff. And they're just
fangs.
and they're just like, no, this is offensive. They're like, there's no sexual body part. It's like other body, but the way they're placed, the way they're placed, the way they're being tortured.
The implication.
Oh, yeah.
He was on that Hieronymus Bosch shit.
Yeah.
And they couldn't fucking handle it.
Yeah. So I remember we watched it and I was just like, oh, that is dope as shit, too. I love that I have that issue.
Mm-hmm. I doubt it, unfortunately.
I probably bought yours.
You might well have. Right out of my shop, it wouldn't shock me. Also, Chuck Patton was recently on a Who's Who podcast where he was talking about the art attributed to that book. And he was talking about being, I think, studio mates with Sean McManus, who drew a fill-in issue of Swamp Thing, where it tied into Walt Kelly's Pogo. And there was another issue that Alan Moore loved writing because he was writing this bizarre syntax that apparently Pogo strips were written in. And I fucking hated that issue. It was the worst issue of the run that I read so far. But Sean McManus, his lifelong dream was to draw an issue of Swamp Thing. And he got to draw one that was written by Alan Moore. So he was happy with it. But we forgot to talk about that issue because I fucking hate it. And I'm sorry that it exists. That I had to read it at least. The other people seem to love it. Good for them. I don't. If Pogo's that's how Pogo's written, I'm never going to fucking read Pogo then.
Art is subjective.
All right, so sum up what Murder of Crows arc in relation to what you read.
I enjoy the stuff that it does. Right, Totleben's artwork is fucking amazing. Several of the stories, my favorite of the stories was the one where they're showing the path to people who take the hallucinogen because that one got me in my heart. But I really enjoyed the one in the house, the Winchester house with the guns.
That was my favorite.
And then there's a lot of stories before that were very strong. I enjoyed a lot of that material. I'm glad I went back and read from the beginning because I got a lot more out of A Murder of Crows having done that. And when as frustrated as you was like, what the fuck is this? Well, I knew what the fuck it was because I'd gone back to read it. But even then, I almost went back and read the Pasco Beach stuff because that last issue that Alan Moore does is so tied up into that lore that he was wrapping up. And it's like, well, I'm kind of curious about what was happening to lead into Alan Moore. And also, those characters do come back post 50, like the supporting characters he wrote off in that one issue come back, and I think he maybe butchers them to make a point about storytelling that he wanted to do with those characters. But I don't know because I don't have the context. I only had the one previous issue that they appeared in that he also wrote. So I don't know if those characters were true to form or not based on what was done with them. But I'm glad I read this stuff. It's stuff that I probably should have read years ago. I probably would have enjoyed it more if I'd read it years ago. But I think it's still enjoyable now, and I think it's definitely worth revisiting. But especially the key short stories, the Tales from the Crypt, EC, 2000 AD type material. Alan Moore is really good at that like introducing concepts that really like send your imagination out there. Where sometimes where he has to fully elaborate on those concepts, I think he falters, and that's where like A Murder of Crows has its weak spots. Again, it's like the classic horror. What you imagine in your head is so much more fearsome than what you can ever render in prosthetics or CGI or whatever. And Alan Moore's better when he's in that mode, where he's just like alluding to something and you're filling in the gap yourself. Yeah. But very enjoyable reads, really great looking stories, and I probably will continue from here. If no other reason I want to be able to say I read the entire Alan Moore run, and I'm already halfway through the 5th fucking book, where I want to stop with the 4th book. Right? I think it's 6 total. Okay. So I'm still around the Gotham stuff and the post Gotham stuff because that doesn't end either, because that leads directly into another story arc, and I'm partway through that one right now. So I'll go back to it eventually, but I still want to break. And since we're recording the episode, this has got an opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to stop now for a month or so, and I'll go back to it when I feel the energy to read up on the rest of it. But I will finish out more run because it is quality stuff. There are frustrations. There are limitations. There's also the problem that where I've read people who've taken his ideas and run with them and enjoyed that material first. So it's kind of been spoiled by other people's work. But I definitely think it's worth being like treated as something that people should read. Like something that should be part of the catalog, part of the syllabus. It deserves that place. And I really enjoyed some of it, even though some of it left me a little underwhelmed.
Okay, I think that's a pretty good description of how I felt about this arc, is that it alluding to this impending disaster it really helped propel the reading.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to know what was going to happen next. And then the in-between those the little crumbs of what was going to happen, these what would normally
tantalizing.
It'd normally be like filler stories and instead they were like great. Like you really enjoy them. And really for this being like mid 80s and it's like Alan Moore, this is not Claremont level exposition either. Like it's tight, it's very easy to follow until you get to that final thing where you're just sort of like, what? Yeah. They're holding hands?
And it's funny too, I read so many issues in a row without any Parliament. Sometime around the Parliament of Trees stuff, I just started drifting. And I didn't really know why, but I think it was the concepts weren't grabbing me like they were.
Him going into the monster should have been more than like 4 panels. Mm-hmm. It should have been let's go an extra level deeper with what the Parliament of Trees was explaining, and you know what I mean, answer some of these questions that he'd been having with Constantine, and progress the character. Instead, he comes out and he's just like, what happened? Yeah. I don't even know what happened.
Well, and also where the placement of the Parliament of Trees story was, it really just slows the progress. Like they should have probably gone right into the crow's flying. Well, we need to chase after that crow and go into hell, and then maybe flash back to.
But that was great, where they would place the crow, like you said, they were flying through these different like universes as it's progressing through to the end where it's going to drop marble. It's cool, and you're like waiting to see. But again, it didn't quite get there. It wasn't bad. I'm not like mad at the ending or whatever.
It was just a letdown compared to some of the stuff that built to that. It was so the build-up was so good. The punchline was like, but the build-up was so good. You know? Yeah, it's like the Aristocrats. It's like all these details are what's great, and then you get a bunch like
the Aristocrats. Yeah. But no, it was cool. This is obviously just like a small tidbit of Alan Moore's run.
Tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, right. So I don't think I can compare it to like everything else in '86. Was this '86 when this came out?
Yeah, okay. That's why we were doing this for the 40th anniversary.
Yeah. I figured that this was the chunk that was in '86. But I mean, I wouldn't say this is Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, Born Again.
Yeah.
But if it's taken as like a whole run that maybe had like a peak in '86, or not peak in '86. I don't know how to. But
there's a little bit of a Tarantino thing here, where, like I said, there are scenes playing in Swamp Thing that bear fruit in books like Dark Knight and Born Again, and those moments were more resonant. So it's like, they were ripping off Swamp Thing, but they worked better in the new context. So we did a better job with it ultimately.
But if you want to use this as one of the reasons why '86 is the year, I get it.
Yeah,
this is like grown up stuff. This is big boy stuff. Right. This is not smash 'em up superhero action figures anymore.
That's why guys like Ramsey Campbell and Clive Barker are doing introductions to these books.
Right. And I can see how when you read this, you're like, oh, we can do other stuff. That's right.
We don't just have to do superhero bullshit. We don't just have to do like the anthology horror stuff. We can actually do something that's literate that fully explores the space.
And it doesn't get rejected by the readers. They're actually
rejected by the comic code and can't get it on stands. Yeah.
Right. So I understand the importance of this book, and some of the issues I was very happy with.
Funny side story. Frank was talking about murder of crows, and for some reason my YouTube put up a video of this farmer who has a small farm of chickens, and they've been having hawk problems for years where hawks would kill them. So someone had told him, put a little stand and put some trinkets, dog food, and let the crows come. And so crows started coming. He said first was 1, 2. After a while, he had a murder of crows. Well, now when these hawks would come, these crows found it as the hawk was invading their territory, and they would attack. So it'd be like 5 or 6 crows chasing a hawk. And he's recording the whole thing. He's like, I've never seen this. I was told by an old-timey farmer that they call it a murder of crows because that's what they do. They go in a team of murder. They go and they murder anything that crosses their territory. And they found that because this man put trinkets, it's like a relationship now. We'll take care of your chickens, but you have to feed us, keep us, provide to us. And so he said now that's what he does. He built 2 more, and he puts different types of food and trinkets, and the crows will come and they protect.
So like magpies, they like shiny things that all their food.
Well, he said he puts like some food on one. He might put like little stones on another, and the crows heroes will come and play with this stuff, but they now find that, okay, you give us something, so we will protect. Yeah. And he's talking about, he's like, it's the strangest thing. And so it was weird that you mentioned it, and my TV decided to like, oh, you need to watch this video.
Crows are one of the weird animals, like dolphins.
Some of the smartest.
Dolphins, octopi, some like pie-in dogs that like do things that are very weird, that are like borderline human. Crows are that too, where they can vocalize, and they can, some of them can talk, and mimic noises and stuff, and they do strange stuff like that. And they're very trainable, and it creeps me out. That kind of stuff kind of creeps me out.
I think it's kind of cool.
It's awesome, but it's bizarre.
And that's my part.
This episode brought to you by Hymns.
Swamp Thing, you are amazing. You fight everything. Nasty. Swamp Thing, Earth really needs you. Arcane is bad, for sure. So come on, fight for right. We need you. We think you're special. Alex O. Alan Boyce, Jr. The Bat Pod, Between the Pages blog. Billy Hines, Comics Enabler and Victim. Billy D. Chris at Bat Books for Beginners. Dave's Comic Heroes blog. David Mack, DC Dave. Derek W.C. Edmore. Flanger. The Hammer Strikes. Random Geek, E. Stuff. Imagine 8 Design. Irredeemable Shag. Keith G. Baker. King Dinnersaur. Mark Gray, Maxo. Meme Stealing Raccoon. The Newsprint Commando. Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Ronald Clark. Riley, Sam Lowe. Scott X. Snack Zoto, Sophia. Thirsty's New and Used. And Ulla Bikenko. Captain Entropy wrote of DKR 40. The Dark Knight Returns. Listened to this episode, made notes to write a comment, lost the notes. Listened again, rewrote the notes, then waited 12 days to write the comment. If any of this comes across as incoherent, it's because of that last 12-day delay before interpreting my cryptic notes. I enjoyed this episode immensely. Dark Knight Returns is one of the comics I've read many times over the last 40 years, though it might be at least 10 years since I read it last. It's possible the apocalyptic vibe has been a little too much to take since 2016. As you said, it is certainly relevant today, and it seems to become so cyclically. There have been a ton of interviews and discussions of this comic over the last 40 years, and I've only consumed a small percentage of that content. However, of what I've seen, this discussion was the most comprehensive and accurate about what made this a great comic, despite its flaws, and as you all said, in some cases because of its flaws. Random comments follow. Like you all, I wasn't a fan of All-Star Batman or DK2. I never read DK3, but I heard better things about it. One other Frank Miller Batman you missed was the Image Comics edition of the Spawn/Batman crossover, which Miller wrote and Todd McFarlane drew. It was awful, in my opinion. It read as an insult to the character and those who enjoy him, so it may have been Miller venting his spleen about something. Someone brought up the Christ narrative or messianic nature of Dark Knight Returns. I don't think that's as explicit as it often is in Superman, even though Supes was originally more of a Moses analog. But I 100% agree that it's there, especially in the anti-establishment aspect. Like Jesus in the Gospels, senior leaders in the establishment are against Batman because his work highlights their failures. I read somewhere back in the 80s that predicting technological change is relatively easy compared to predicting social change. Jules Verne's stories about the future were the example being cited. I think the problems of predicting social change are evident here, and you all alluded to the reason why. Miller simply took the trends of the day and extrapolated them out a decade or two. He didn't account for the effect of pendulum swings back in the other direction. That said, it was still effective because it created a funhouse mirror for us to look at ourselves in and kind of a warning about where we were headed. You settled on challenging read as the way to describe the almost stop-motion storytelling. As you point out, by forcing the reader to draw conclusions in his head about what's going on between the panels even more than usual for comics, Miller made the impact of the story more intense. Like the shark attacks in Jaws, more of it happens in our heads than on the page. That's why I hesitate to hand Dark Knight Returns to anyone who isn't fairly comics literate or even very familiar with Batman and his mythos. But I probably shouldn't be hesitant. They'll get it on repeated readings, just like we did. I was very much a Batman guy when I first read this in 1989, and I think it had even more immediate impact because of the references I was getting. That said, you identified some influences I never had before, like Carmine Infantino and Miracle Man, and I can definitely see them now. It's awesome that he drew on Infantino. To me, it was how he showed us that this is still the same Batman we remember, just carried to a logical extreme. And as you said, once he stretched Batman so successfully, the character never fully rebounded to his original shape. I agree with your assessment of the book's massive impact on Batman as a character and comics as a whole, especially American comics. As I think the Illegal Machine said, it isn't that Dark Knight Returns is definitely the greatest comic of all time. It's that it's so great, we can't knock it out of the running.
The preceding program is a non-profit fan production. Any copyrighted materials contained therein are believed borrowed under fair use with no copyright infringement intended. Please feel free to leave comments at Rolled Spine's Productions WordPress blog. You can also send us Twitter comments through the Rolled Spine Podcast Twitter. Thank you for listening.